I spent 4 years eating expired canned beans so I could pay my parents' mortgage, only to find a statement in my sister's trash showing she's sitting on a $500,000 gift from them. I'm standing in the kitchen right now holding the proof, and I can hear them laughing in the next room about how easy I am to handle. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 27 years old. I work as a freelance data analyst, a job that, on paper, should allow me to live in a modern downtown apartment with a car that doesn't rattle every time I go over 40 miles per hour. Instead, I live in my childhood home, a place that smells like stale air, lemon-scented floor cleaner, and the slow decay of broken dreams. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, the one who pays the bills, fixes the leaks, and absorbs everyone else's stress, you need to listen to this. I thought I was being a hero. I thought I was saving my family from homelessness, but I was just a source of revenue. Before we get into the details of the digital trail I found, hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, you're going to want to see how I take everything back. Stay until the end, because the way this house of cards falls is something you don't want to miss. The kitchen was freezing, as usual. My father, Robert, is obsessed with the thermostat. He keeps it at exactly 62 degrees. He calls it fiscal discipline. Every time I'd reach for the dial to stop my teeth from chattering, he'd give me this look, this hollow, haunted stare, and remind me that the market crash of 4 years ago took everything they worked for. He's a retired accountant, a man who lives by the numbers, and for years, those numbers were always in the red. I've spent the last 48 months funneling nearly 70% of my income into a family survival fund. I moved back home, gave up my independence, and started wearing my old high school sweaters just to save a few bucks. I thought we were all suffering together. Sarah, honey, my mum, Linda, called from the living room. Her voice had that specific fragile tremor she uses when she's about to ask for money. Did you manage to pick up that heart medication? I know the copay is high this month, but I've been feeling so lightheaded. I looked at the pharmacy bag on the counter. $145. I'd paid for it with my grocery money for the week. I got it, Mom, I called back, my voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I leaned down to empty the kitchen trash. We don't use actual trash bags. We use plastic grocery sacks, because spending money on something you throw away is a sin. As I pulled the sack out, a crumpled piece of heavy, high-quality bond paper fluttered to the floor. It was too thick to be a grocery receipt. It was the kind of paper law firms use to make you feel intimidated before you even read the words. I smoothed it out on the counter, my hand still cold from the 6-2 degree air. My heart stopped. It was a quarterly statement from Vanguard Wealth Management. Account holder: Maya Jenkins. Trustee. Total portfolio value: $542,109.88. My sister, Maya, is 22. She's currently finding herself, which mostly involves sleeping until noon and journaling about how the 9-to-5 grind is a tool of the patriarchy. She hasn't held a job in 3 years because of her anxiety. I looked at the transaction history on the statement. Last Tuesday, there was a deposit of $4,000. It was labelled Monthly Maintenance Transfer, Fund R and L. R and L, Robert and Linda, my parents. My stomach did a slow, nauseating flip. Last Tuesday was the day my father sat me down and cried actual, physical tears about how the property taxes had doubled and we might lose the house if I couldn't dig deep one more time. I had transferred him $5,000 from my emergency savings that afternoon. They didn't pay the taxes. They didn't fix the imaginary roof leak they told me about last month. They took my hard-earned savings and handed it to my sister. Suddenly, a burst of laughter erupted from the living room. It wasn't the sound of people struggling. It was the sound of people who just won the lottery. She actually believed the heart medication story. I heard my mum whisper. She didn't sound sick. She sounded triumphant. She was so worried she almost started crying at the pharmacy. It's almost a shame, Robert. She's such a sweet girl. She's a workhorse, Linda, my dad replied, his voice low and cold. And horses don't need to know where the hay comes from. They just need to keep pulling the plow. Maya needs the security. Sarah is resilient. She doesn't need a safety net because she is the safety net. Resilient. That's the word they use when they want to see how much more you can take before you break. I stared at the $542,000 figure. I thought about the dentist appointment I cancelled last month because $200 felt like too much to spend on myself. I thought about the emergency car repair that I paid for, which I now suspect was just a way to get me to pay for Maya's weekend trips. I didn't storm in there. I didn't scream. I've learned from years of data analysis that you don't react to the first outlier. You look for the pattern. I quietly folded the statement and tucked it into the lining of my laptop bag. I walked toward the living room, my face a perfect mask of the exhausted, dutiful daughter. Mum, I'm heading up to bed. I've got a 6 a.m. start for a new client, I said, leaning against the doorframe. My mum looked up from her tea, her eyes wide and innocent. Oh, you poor thing. You work too hard. We're so lucky to have you, Sarah. We truly are. I looked at my dad. He gave me a warm, fatherly nod. Proud of you, kiddo. Keep it up. I turned away before they could see the flicker of fire in my eyes. As I climbed the creaky stairs, I realized I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was an investigator, and by the time I was done, I was going to be their landlord. I locked my bedroom door and opened my laptop. I knew my dad's old passwords. He always used Maya2002. If they wanted to play games with Trust B, it was time for me to find out what happened to Trust A. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs complaining under my weight. The only light in the room came from the bluish glow of my laptop screen, casting long, jagged shadows against the peeling floral wallpaper I'd promised to help Dad fix 3 summers ago. My hands were still shaking, not from the cold this time, but from the sheer, vibrating adrenaline of a woman who just realized her entire reality was a stage play. I opened a private browser and navigated to the login page of our family's primary bank. My father, Robert, always prided himself on being the financial gatekeeper. He'd set up our accounts years ago, and even though I was 27, he still insisted on overseeing my transfers to make sure they hit the right survival sub-accounts. I typed in his username, then I hovered my fingers over the keys for the password, Maya2002. It was my sister's name and birth year, not mine, never mine. I'd always written it off as him just picking something easy to remember, but tonight, it felt like a slap in the face. It was the password to the life I was funding, but wasn't allowed to live. Click. The screen flickered, then loaded. I wasn't just in. I was standing in the middle of their secret treasury. I scrolled past my own meager checking account, the one they kept drained to the bone, and looked at the hidden accounts tab. My breath hitched. There wasn't just the Vanguard account I'd found the statement for. There was a secondary savings account labelled R&L Reserve. Balance: $128,430.15. I felt a hot surge of bile rise in my throat. This was the broke couple who cried because they couldn't afford a new heater when the house hit 50 degrees last winter. This was the man who made me feel like a selfish brat for wanting to buy a $50 dress for my best friend's wedding. I clicked on the transaction history for the R&L Reserve. My eyes scanned the lines, and the further I scrolled, the more my world fractured. July 14th. Deposit $5,000. Memo: Sarah Roof. August 2nd. Withdrawal $4,800. Memo: Buyer Boutique, Spa. September 12th. Deposit $2,200. Memo: Sarah, Medical. September 15th. Withdrawal $2,000. Memo, Robert Golf membership. They weren't even trying to hide it in the memos. They thought I was so beaten down, so resilient, that I'd never think to look. They viewed my labour as a direct pipeline to their luxury. Every emergency I'd bled for was just a line item for Maya's shopping trips or Dad's weekend hobbies. But then I saw it, the Trust A file. It was an electronic document attached to the account summary. I downloaded it, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was a PDF titled Jenkins Family Trust, Distribution Schedule. I scrolled past the legal jargon until I hit the beneficiary section. Beneficiary 1. Maya Elizabeth Jenkins. 100% of remaining liquid assets, property, and investment dividends. Beneficiary 2. Sarah Lynn Jenkins. $0. Note: subject has demonstrated high earning capacity and self-sufficiency. Funds prioritized for vulnerable family members. Vulnerable. They used that word like a weapon. Because I worked, because I saved, because I survived their psychological warfare, I was being punished. My reward for being the glue holding this family together was to be legally stripped of everything my grandparents had intended for us. I remembered my Grandpa Joe telling me before he passed, "Sarah, I've made sure you girls will never have to worry." He'd left a massive inheritance. I'd always been told the 2008 crash and subsequent bad investments had evaporated it. They didn't evaporate it, they just moved it. They'd spent a decade gaslighting me into thinking I was the only thing standing between them and the streets, all while they sat on a mountain of my grandfather's gold. A notification chimed on the screen, a new email in my dad's inbox. I shouldn't have clicked it. I should have stopped there. But I couldn't. It was from Maya, sent 20 minutes ago. "Hey Dad, Sarah gave me the $50 for rent today. She looked a bit suspicious, so I played up the stressed sister act. It worked. But listen, we need to move faster on the surgery scam. I saw a pair of designer boots in the city, and I really don't want to wait until her next paycheck. Can we tell her Mum needs the deposit for the cardiologist by Friday?" I stared at the words until they blurred. A shame. A workhorse. A resource. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a high-yield savings account with a heartbeat. I looked at the clock. 2:14 a.m. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the one I'd paid to repair 2 months ago. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I looked older than 27. I looked tired. I looked like someone who had been carrying the weight of 4 people on her shoulders while they kicked her shins. But the tiredness was fading. In its place was something cold and sharp, a clarity I'd never felt before. I started downloading everything, every statement, every memo, every email. I moved them into a secure, encrypted cloud folder they'd never find. I took screenshots of the Sarah Roof memos. I saved the Sarah medical deposits. Then, I went back to the trust document. I noticed a small detail in the fine print at the bottom. The trust was governed by a good faith clause. If a trustee was found to be misappropriating funds or committing fraud against a potential heir, the entire trust could be contested and frozen. My dad was the executor. Maya was the trustee. And they had just spent 4 years documenting their own fraud in the bank memos. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a soft thud from the hallway. I slammed my laptop shut and shoved it under my pillow. I slowed my breathing, closing my eyes just as the door handle turned. It was a slow, agonizingly quiet rotation. The door creaked open. A sliver of light from the hallway hit my face. I kept my eyes shut, praying my heart wouldn't give me away. "Sarah?" It was my dad. His voice was a whisper, but it didn't have that warm, fatherly tone from earlier. It was cold, calculating. I didn't move. I heard him step into the room. The floorboard near my desk groaned. He stayed there for what felt like an hour, just watching me. checking to see if his workhorse was still asleep, still compliant, still ready to be milked for another few $1,000s in the morning. "Good girl," he whispered, so softly I almost missed it. The door closed. The lock clicked. He had locked me in, from the outside. My eyes snapped open in the dark. He had never locked my door before. Never. Did he know? Did he see me in the kitchen earlier? Or was this just the next step in making sure I didn't wander and see something I shouldn't before the surgery scam began? I reached under my pillow and gripped my laptop. The heat from the processor was still there, a reminder of the fire I'd just started. He thinks he locked in a victim. He doesn't realize he just locked himself in with the woman who now owns every single one of his secrets. The click of that lock was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It wasn't just a bolt sliding into a frame. It was the sound of the mask finally falling off. My own father had locked me in my room like a prisoner, or a piece of livestock he was afraid might wander off before the slaughter. I sat up in the dark, my heart hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't turn on the light. I couldn't. I needed the shadows. I reached under my pillow and felt the warmth of my laptop, the only weapon I had in a house that had become a cage. If you're still watching, this is where things go from a family drama to a psychological chess match. My loving parents were no longer just greedy, they were dangerous. If you've ever felt trapped in a situation where the people meant to protect you are the ones hurting you, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And don't forget to stay until the end of this part, because the discovery I made in my father's office changed my entire strategy. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours. I listened to the house breathe. I heard the distant hum of the heater, probably turned up now that they thought I was asleep, and the occasional groan of the old timber. Around 4 a.m., I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring of my father from down the hall. I didn't try the door. I knew it was locked. Instead, I turned to the one thing they always neglected, the old laundry chute in my closet. This house was built in the 1920s, and the chute was a direct, narrow drop into the basement. I'm small years of resilient dieting, and stress had kept me thin. I emptied my laundry basket, tied my laptop bag to my waist with a jump rope, and squeezed into the dark, dusty opening. The smell of old lint and cedar hit me as I slid down, my skin scraping against the cold metal. I landed in a heap of damp towels in the basement, my lungs burning. I was out of the room, but I wasn't out of the house. I made my way to my father's office, a converted storage room under the stairs. He kept it locked, but he was a creature of habit. The key was always hidden inside a hollowed-out book on the shelf titled Principles of Accounting, Irony at its Finest. The room smelled of stale cigars and expensive scotch, the kind he told me he couldn't afford to buy for his own birthday. I sat at his desk and opened the bottom drawer. It was filled with folders, but one stood out, a bright red one labelled S, Project. S, for Sarah. I opened it, and my stomach turned. It wasn't just bank statements. It was a ledger of my life, every paycheck I'd ever earned, every loan I'd given them, and a calculated projection of my future earnings. He had a spreadsheet predicting how much more they could extract from me over the next 5 years before I burned out. But then I found the surgery file. It wasn't for my mum's heart. It was a brochure for a luxury villa in Tuscany. They weren't planning a surgery. They were planning a convalescence trip for the 3 of them. A 3-month European vacation funded entirely by the $25,000 emergency medical deposit they were planning to demand from me on Friday. I saw a sticky note in Maya's handwriting stuck to the brochure. Make sure she thinks the doctor said it's life or death. She always pays more when she's scared. I felt a cold, jagged anger crystallize in my chest. I wasn't just a bank. I was an entertainment fund. They were mocking my fear. They were weaponizing my love for my mother to buy themselves a vacation while I wore thrift-store shoes. I took pictures of every single page. The S, project ledger, the Tuscany brochure, the fake medical invoices they'd been photoshopping to show me. But then, I found something that made the $500,000 trust fund look like pocket change. Tucked into the back of the folder was a life insurance policy. It was a policy on me. The beneficiary wasn't a trust. It wasn't a survival fund. It was a private offshore account in Maya's name. And the policy amount? $2 million. My hands began to shake, so violently, I almost dropped my phone. The policy had been updated a month ago to include a high-risk, accidental death rider. I looked at the car repair receipts I'd paid for last month, the ones for the grinding brakes on my car. I remembered my dad saying he'd taken it to a friend to save me money. Was the grinding really gone? Or was it being timed? Suddenly, I heard footsteps on the floorboards directly above my head, the kitchen. Someone was awake. I froze, holding my breath, my heart thundering so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the floor. The footsteps moved toward the basement door. The handle turned. I had no way out. The laundry chute was a one-way trip. The basement windows were painted shut. The door creaked open, and a sliver of light spilled down the stairs. "Dad?" a voice whispered. It was Maya. I tucked myself into the shadows behind the furnace, my phone screen pressed against my chest to hide the glow. I watched through the slats of the wooden stairs as her designer slippers stepped down, one by one. She wasn't looking for me. She went straight to the freezer in the corner, pulled out a pint of expensive gelato, the $12 a pint kind, and started eating it right out of the container with a silver spoon. She looked happy. She looked rested. She looked like a girl who didn't have a care in the world because she had a workhorse upstairs doing all the caring for her. She took a bite, scrolled on her phone for a second, and then muttered to herself, "Hurry up and pay, Sarah. I need those boots." She finished her snack, tossed the container deep into the trash so I wouldn't see it, and headed back upstairs, clicking the basement door shut. I stayed in the dark for a long time, the smell of dust and betrayal thick in the air. I realized then that I couldn't just leave. If I left, they'd find a way to spin it. They'd claim I was unstable. They'd use that life insurance policy. Or they'd simply disappear with the money I'd already given them. No, I needed to do more than leave. I needed to dismantle them. I climbed back up the laundry chute, a grueling, painful process that left my nails bleeding, and managed to slip back into my room just as the sun began to peek through the blinds. I crawled into bed, clothes and all, and pulled the covers up. Minutes later, I heard the lock on my door slide back. "Morning, sunshine," my dad called out, his voice booming with fake cheer. "Big day today. I've got that meeting with the cardiologist's office. You think you can have that deposit ready by noon? Mum's really struggling this morning." I looked at him, seeing the predator behind the accountant eyes, for the first time. "Of course, Dad," I said, forcing a sleepy, compliant smile. "Whatever Mum needs. I'll go to the bank as soon as I'm dressed." He beamed at me. "That's my girl, resilient as ever." He walked out, closing the door softly. He thought today was the day he got his $25,000. He had no idea it was the day I started the clock on his ruin. As I sat there, listening to the floorboards groan under my father's retreating footsteps, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. The terror of the night before the life insurance policy, the laundry chute, the locked door it had hardened into something cold and crystalline. I felt like a grandmaster looking at a chessboard, where my opponent hadn't realized I'd already taken their queen. If you've ever had to play a role just to survive, you know the exhaustion that comes with it, but you also know the power. They thought they were playing me, but I was about to give them a masterclass in data manipulation. Stick around for this part, because the way I used my workhorse reputation to bait the trap is something you'll want to remember if you ever find yourself in a corner. I got out of bed and dressed in my most exhausted-looking outfit, an oversized faded hoodie and jeans with frayed hems. I made sure my hair looked a little greasy, my eyes a little bloodshot. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of expensive coffee hit me. Not the store brand stuff I bought. This was premium roast. Ugh, Sarah, my mum whimpered, slumped over her tea. She was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, likely hidden in the same place as Maya's shopping bags. I had such a rough night. The palpitations. I really think we need to get that deposit to the specialist today. I looked at her, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of the old Sarah, the one who wanted to fix everything. But then, I remembered the S, Project Ledger. I remembered the Tuscany brochure. I know, Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I've been looking at my accounts. I can get the $25,000, but I have to go to the main branch downtown. They won't authorize a transfer that big over the phone for a medical emergency without seeing me in person. This was my first move. I needed to get out of the house without them following me. My dad looked up from his paper, his eyes sharpening. Downtown. Why not the local branch? I can drive you. They flagged my account because of the roof repair transfer last month. I lied, looking him straight in the eye with the practiced innocence he'd taught me. They think it's fraud. If you come with me, it might look even more suspicious. I need to go alone, tell them it's for my own private investments, and then I can withdraw the cashier's check. I saw the greed war with the control in his head. The greed won. $25,000 was a lot of designer boots and Italian wine. Fine, he grunted. But be quick, your mother's health can't wait. I walked out the door, feeling the weight of the S project files on the encrypted drive in my pocket. I didn't go to the bank. Well, not my bank. I went to the law firm of Sterling and Associates, the firm that managed the Jenkins family trust. I didn't have an appointment, but I walked in with the resilient energy of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I sat down in the lobby and refused to leave until I spoke with Marcus, the attorney whose name I'd seen in my father's emails. When I finally got into his mahogany-panelled office, he looked at me like I was a smudge on his expensive carpet. Miss Jenkins, your father handles all the trust communications. If this is about your allowance... I don't have an allowance, I interrupted, leaning across his desk. I have a $542,000 inheritance that is currently being laundered into my sister's private accounts through a series of fraudulent emergency claims, and I have the digital receipts to prove it. I laid my phone on the desk and hit play on the screen recording I'd made of my father's S project, ledger, and the memos linking my roof repair money to Maya's spa days. Marcus's face went from bored to ghostly pale in about 6 seconds. As an attorney, he knew exactly what he was looking at: breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and a massive liability for his firm if they had facilitated any of it. I'm not here to sue you, Marcus, I said, my voice as cold as the ice in my father's scotch. I'm here to give you an out. You're going to freeze the trust accounts immediately. You're going to cite internal auditing discrepancies, and you're going to send a formal notice to my father that the parental gifts to Maya are being clawed back, pending a full forensic investigation. I can't just... You can, I said, because if you don't, the next person I show this to is the district attorney, along with the life insurance policy my father took out on me with a high-risk accident rider. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus looked at the files, then at me. He realized the workhorse had just grown teeth. It will take 4 hours to process the freeze, he whispered. Perfect, I replied. That gives me just enough time to have lunch. But I didn't have lunch. I went to a local tech shop and bought a high-definition, covert camera, the kind that looks like a standard USB wall charger. I drove back to the house, my heart racing, and walked into the living room where my sick mother and worried father were waiting. Did you get it? My dad asked, standing up before I'd even closed the door. The check is being processed, I said, holding up a blank envelope I'd taken from the bank's lobby. It'll be ready for pickup at 5 p.m. But the bank said they need a verbal confirmation from Mum's doctor first. They're calling him at 4:30. What? My mom gasped, sitting up straight. They can't do that. I told them it was urgent, I said, looking distressed. I'm so sorry. I think they're just being extra careful because of the amount. I watched them exchange a panicked look. They didn't have a doctor. They had a Photoshop template. I'm going to go lie down, I said. The stress is giving me a migraine. I'll go get the check at 4:45. I went upstairs, but I didn't lie down. I plugged the covert camera into the outlet in the kitchen, angled perfectly to catch the dining table. Then I went to my room, locked the door from the inside this time, and opened my laptop. At 4 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the covert camera. Motion detected. I watched the live feed on my laptop. My mum, Dad, and Maya were all huddled around the kitchen table. Maya was holding a laptop, the new MacBook I'd paid for, and my dad was pacing. We just need to spoof the call, Maya said, her voice sharp and annoyed. I can use a voice changer app. I'll pretend to be the receptionist at the clinic. Sarah is too stupid to know the difference. Be careful, my dad warned. She's been acting strange all day. If we don't get that $25,000 tonight, the Italy trip is off. The deposit for the villa is due at midnight. She'll pay, my mum said, reaching for a plate of cookies she'd hidden in the pantry. She always pays. She thinks I'm dying. It's the perfect leverage. I watched them laugh. I watched them mock my stupidity. I watched my father pull out a bottle of champagne to pre-celebrate the heist. And then, at 4:15 p.m., my father's phone rang. I watched his face go from smug to terrified, in real time. I watched his hand shake as he answered. Hello? Yes, this is Robert Jenkins. Sterling and Associates. An audit? What do you mean the accounts are frozen? The look of pure, unadulterated panic on their faces as their golden goose turned into a dragon was better than any $500,000 inheritance could ever be. The silence that followed my father's phone call was the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced. Through the lens of the hidden camera, I watched the three of them freeze, like statues in a museum of greed. My father's jaw was literally hanging open. Maya had her hand over her mouth, her expensive manicure glinting in the kitchen light. My dying mother was standing perfectly upright, her heart condition miraculously cured by the sudden threat to her bank account. If you've stuck with me this long, you're about to see what happens when the quiet daughter finally stops being quiet. This isn't just about the money anymore, it's about taking back my life. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found out your parents were planning a European vacation with your life savings? Let's dive into the final confrontation. I didn't wait for them to come to me. I walked down the stairs slowly, deliberately, letting the old wood groan under my feet. I wanted them to hear me coming. I wanted them to feel that same dread I felt when I heard the lock click on my bedroom door. When I entered the kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of unpopped champagne and desperation. Sarah! My dad barked, trying to regain his head of household persona. His face was a blotchy, panicked red. Something's happened. The bank. There's been a mistake. We need you to call that lawyer friend of yours. And it wasn't a mistake, Dad, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I pulled my phone out and hit a button. The audio of their conversation, from 10 minutes ago, the part where Maya called me too stupid and my mum laughed about her leverage, started playing at full volume. The colour drained from their faces, so fast it was almost comical. Maya actually dropped her MacBook. I know about Trust B, I said, my voice steady and cold. I know about the $542,000. I know about the project ledger. And I definitely know about the $2 million life insurance policy with the high-risk accident rider. I looked my father directly in the eye. The brakes on my car weren't grinding because of wear and tear, were they, Dad? You were just waiting for the right moment on the highway. Sarah, that's insane, he stammered, but he couldn't look me in the eye. We would never. We love you. You love my earning capacity, I corrected him. But that's over. I've already spoken to Marcus at Sterling and Associates. The trust is frozen. The forensic audit starts Monday. And since I have proof of embezzlement and premeditated fraud, I've given them a choice. Either they return every cent of my loans into a private account in my name only, or I take this recording and the project files to the police. You wouldn't, Maya hissed, her face contorting into something ugly. You'd destroy this family. You destroyed this family the moment you turned your sister into a business plan, Maya. I said, by the way, that MacBook? I've already reported it stolen. The police will be here in 20 minutes, if it's still in this house. Maya's eyes went wide, and she scrambled to pick up the laptop, looking at the door like she wanted to run. Sit down, I commanded. And for the first time in 22 years, she obeyed me. The next 3 hours were a brutal, clinical dissection of their lies. I sat at the head of the table, the seat my father usually occupied, and laid out the terms of their retirement. I wasn't going to send them to jail. That would be too quick. No, I wanted them to live the life they'd forced me to live. I'd already contacted a real estate agent. The house was being sold. With the equity and the clawed-back funds from Maya's trust, I was moving into a place of my own, a place they didn't have the address to. My parents would be moving into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment I'd rented for them in a boring suburb. No silk robes, no premium coffee, no specialists. Just the basic, state-funded existence they'd pretended to have while they were robbing me. You can't leave us with nothing, my mom sobbed, the tears finally real this time. I'm leaving you exactly what you gave me, I said. Resilience. You're built for the grind, remember, Mom? It gives you purpose. As I packed my final bag, the house felt different. It didn't feel like a cage anymore. It just felt like a building. I walked past the laundry chute and smiled. I didn't get a big, cinematic apology. My dad didn't hug me and ask for forgiveness. Maya didn't realize the error of her ways. They just sat in the kitchen, arguing with each other about whose fault it was that the Sarah well had run dry. It was a realistic ending, messy, quiet, and filled with a lingering bitterness. But as I drove away in my car, with new brakes I'd paid a certified mechanic to install, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I'd been carrying since I was a teenager. I had $280,000 back in my account, a new job offer in a different city, and a future that belonged entirely to me. I looked in the rearview mirror as the childhood home faded into the distance. I wasn't a workhorse. I wasn't a resource. I was finally, for the first time in my life, Sarah Jenkins. And Sarah Jenkins was doing just fine. Thanks for staying until the end of this journey. This story was a reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to watch the most. If you've ever dealt with a toxic family dynamic or a betrayal like this, please share your story in the comments. I'm reading all of them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth. See you in the next one.